All right, today we're jumping into the mind of a true giant in psychology, Carl Rogers. We're going to explore his incredible vision for what a psychologically healthy person looks like, something he called the person of tomorrow.
But before we get into all that, let me ask you something. Just think about this for a second. What if you could live your life without fear, without putting up a front? Without that heavy suit of armor we all wear to protect ourselves? What would that even feel like?
Well, it turns out that exact question was the life's work of psychotherapist Carl Rogers. And here's the cool part. His ideas didn't just come from some stuffy textbook. Nope, they came from thousands upon thousands of hours sitting with real people in therapy, just watching. He saw what happens when you create the perfect environment for someone to grow. He got absolutely fascinated by what we're all capable of.
So what did he call this ideal? The fully functioning person. And it's really important to get this. It's not some impossible goal you have to strive for. It's more of a description, right? It's about the kind of person who just emerges naturally when they finally feel totally seen, accepted, and understood for who they are.
All right, let's dive in. Let's unpack this blueprint from Rogers for what it really means to be psychologically healthy.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Rogers had this kind of evolutionary spin on it. He didn't just think this kind of person would be happier. He thought they'd be more likely to survive. I mean, think about it. In a world that's always changing, being able to adapt is way more valuable than just sticking to the old rules, right?
Okay, so where does that adaptability even come from? Well, it all starts on the inside. So let's take a look at the inner world of this person of tomorrow.
Rogers pinpointed three main pillars that really define how they relate to themselves. First, being totally open to experience. Second, having this deep trust in yourself. And third, really living in the moment.
So that first pillar, it's all about a kind of radical openness. See, instead of twisting reality or denying things to make them fit what we want to believe, this person just lets it all in, all of it. As Rogers said, they can feel their joy, their anger, their disappointment, even their fear, and not get totally knocked over by it.
Okay, on to pillar number 2. This is a big one. Trusting what he called the organismic self. It's a fancy term, but it's basically your gut feeling, right? That deep inner sense of what feels right for you. Your emotions, your intuition, all of it wrapped together. So instead of always looking outside for rules or what other people think, they trust their own internal compass to guide them. And of course, they're still totally aware of how their choices affect others.
And all of that leads perfectly into the third pillar, which he called existential living. It's pretty simple, really. Because they're so open and they trust themselves, they're able to live completely in the present moment. Every single experience feels new, fresh. It's not colored by what happened yesterday or what they expect for tomorrow. For them, life isn't some fixed thing. It's a process, always flowing.
Okay, so that's the internal stuff. But what does that look like on the outside? How does all this translate into their relationships with other people? How do they actually show up in the world?
It's funny, Rogers actually described this by talking about what's not there. He used this powerful list of negatives. Their relationships are defined by what's missing. So there's no fakeness, no playing games, no hiding behind a mask. They are just who they are. What you see is what you get.
And that right there is so, so important. That authenticity, it's like a gift they give to other people. Because they're not hiding. It creates this safe space where everyone else feels like, hey, maybe I can take my mask off too. It allows everyone to be a little more real.
And this all comes from a fundamental trust in people. They just don't have that impulse to hurt others to get ahead. Sure, they still get angry, they're still human, but you can trust them to handle those feelings in a healthy way. All right, let's start putting the pieces together. How do all these internal and external traits combine to make what Rogers called a truly integrated, a whole person?
So for a lot of us, right, there's this gap. It can be kind of painful. It's the space between who we feel we should be, our ideal self, and who we actually are, our real self. Well, for the person of tomorrow, that gap just shrinks. It gets way, way smaller. And that means a lot less fighting with yourself on the inside.
Rogers' definition of being integrated was basically having no wall between your conscious mind and your unconscious mind. Because they're open to everything they're feeling and experiencing, they can see it all clearly. Nothing is repressed, nothing is hidden or locked away from themselves.
And what's the payoff for all this? Well, here it is. Because they aren't trying to numb their emotions or bend reality, they just experience life more fully, more deeply. The good times feel even better, and they can handle the tough times with a lot more clarity. It all leads to a much richer life.
So you might be thinking, okay, this is all great, but why does this vision from decades ago still matter so much? Well, let's circle all the way back to that core idea we started with, survival and adaptation.
What Rogers was really getting at is that in our crazy, complex, constantly changing world, the most important thing for survival isn't being the strongest or the smartest. It's psychological wholeness. It's the ability to just be you, fully, authentically, and with the flexibility to handle whatever comes your way.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. I mean, let's be real. We live in a world that is always pushing us to fit in, to put on a show. So the real question for you is, what's one small thing you can do today, right now, to be a little more open to what you're actually feeling and experiencing?